30 meters of concrete and lead separate my body from the desert sun. 12 years living in the vacuum of a server room, where the real world is reduced to green spikes on an oscilloscope screen. My code name was Echo 7, and my function was to be the invisible ear of a war you don't even know is happening. The official narrative says that peace is maintained by diplomacy and force. The brutal truth? The world you know only didn't catch fire because I decided to break protocol and defy an artificial intelligence that was ready to incinerate thousands of innocents because of a semantic error. What the newspapers call strategic targets, I heard over the radio. They were just sheep in the pasture. Pay close attention to what I am about to say, because revealing this turned me into a ghost in the army records. This truth almost cost me my career, and in the end, almost cost me my soul. If you want to know what really happens in the silence of the shadows, where the truth is buried deeper than my bunker, subscribe to this channel and leave your signal in the comments. Not everything that vibrates in the static is what they tell you. Come closer, my children. Bring your chairs closer to the fire. Heat is good for the bones of those who have seen too many winters. I feel that my tent, this tired body, is finally falling apart. It is a strange process, you know. We spend our whole lives trying to reinforce the stakes, patching the fabric, but in the end we realize we were made for the sky, not the ground. Before I leave, I needed to tell you about the day silence became the loudest voice I ever heard. I am not talking about the silence of an empty room, but that which lies between one life and the next. I worked for many years in a place where the world was reduced to radio waves and shadows of sound. 30 meters below the desert, buried under tons of concrete and lead. Down there, time did not pass like it does out here. There was no morning or afternoon, just the incessant hum of the servers and that metallic smell of ozone and recycled air that sticks to your skin and soul. I was Echo 7. A faceless name for a man whose only function was to hear what the enemy whispered in the dark. That morning, if it was morning, the bunker felt charged with a different electricity. High Command had already decided what was going to happen. The screens were full of maps, red dots, and orders of probable aggression. They did not want more information, my children. They just wanted the pretext. And I was there, sitting at my console, with my fingers tracing the grooves of the dial, feeling the world outside about to explode, while I remained in a vacuum of artificial silence. My headset, that old peeling leather I insisted on not replacing, was my crown of thorns and my refuge. When I put it on, the bunker vanished. The voices of the generals and the noise of the fans dissipated, and I dove into the ocean of static. But on that day, something was wrong. It was not just Channel 42 that was unstable. It was me. I felt a pang in my chest, a dull pressure, as if an invisible hand was squeezing my heart, synchronized with the pulse of the emergency lights that were starting to flash in a blood-red tone. The briefing on my monitor said, "Immediate kinetic response." The world was about to catch fire, and I felt my own fire going out. The pain rose through my neck, bitter as old coffee. I tried to breathe, but the recycled air seemed to have turned to sand. I looked at the screen, at the frequencies that jumped like desperate heartbeats, and realized my own frequency was failing. Cold sweat ran down into my eyes, salty, blurring the vision of the algorithms that translated the hatred of others. I was there, surrounded by the most advanced technology on Earth, but I felt like a shipwrecked man on a broken raft. The sound of the radio began to drift away. The hiss of the static became soft, almost like the sound of the waves of a sea I never knew. The red lights of the bunker lost their glow, turning into a pale grey, and then into nothing. I remember putting my hand to my chest, trying to grasp the life escaping through my fingers. The headset slipped from my ears, and the last sound I heard from this world was not an explosion or a war cry. It was the dry thud of plastic against the metal floor. And then, my children. The weight of 30 meters of earth over my head disappeared. There was no more concrete. There was no more bunker. I felt my feet leave the ground, and a lightness I never knew existed enveloped me. It was the moment. The door was opening, and I was taking the first step out of my tent, toward the unknown. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine that your whole life you have carried a backpack full of stones. Stones of regret, stones of fear, the weight of your own body which over time becomes stubborn and painful. Now imagine that in a snap of your fingers, the cord breaks. That is how it was. The moment my headset hit the floor down in the bunker, the pain that felt like a dagger in my chest simply evaporated. Have you ever felt such relief? Like when a fever breaks and the world makes sense again. But it was more than that, much more. I was no longer in the darkness of 30 meters of lead and concrete. That recycled air and metallic smell vanished. In its place came a breath. Oh, my children, how sweet that air was. It felt like I had never truly breathed until that second. My lungs, which always seemed too small for my anguish, now expanded as if they could embrace the horizon. I did not fall. I floated. You know when you dive into a pool and for a second gravity forgets you? That was the feeling. But I was not submerged in water. I was immersed in a peace that has no name in our dictionaries. The weight of the uniform, the responsibility of being Echo 7, the guilt for every mistranslated word in life, all of that stayed down there, nailed to that cold metal floor. I was light. I was just me. In the beginning there was a soft twilight, like that remainder of the afternoon before the stars appear. But slowly, a glow began to emerge. It was not like the aggressive light of those fluorescent bulbs that burned my eyes in the bunker. No, no. It was a light that seemed to have a life of its own. Imagine the most beautiful sun you have ever seen rising behind the mountains, but multiply that by 1,000. And the strangest thing, my children, this light did not hurt. It invited. It was the color of honey, the color of old gold, the color of a hug you never want to let go of. It came from all sides. There were no shadows there. How can there be shadow where light itself is the floor, the ceiling, and the air? And the sound. Oh, if I could describe the sound to you. It was not the dead silence of the desert. It was a silence, filled, as if billions of voices were singing in a harmony so perfect that it sounded like a single note. It sounded like the sound of many waters, of a giant waterfall falling into a sea of crystal, but without the noise of impact. It was a music I did not hear with the ears I had left behind. I heard it with my soul. Every fiber of what I was now vibrated together with that sound. I found myself walking, or rather gliding, toward that radiance. Every step I took, the feeling of home grew stronger. You know when you travel for years and finally see the light on your mother's porch? That was it. I was returning. I was not a spy. I was not a soldier. I was not a translator of wars. I was a son returning for dinner. The darkness of the world down below became so small, so irrelevant. The wars, the codes, the generals with their maps, all of that seemed like a broken toy I had left in the garden. The light became more intense, warmer, more real than anything I had ever touched. And in that infinite glow I began to realize that the vastness was not empty. There was a presence. It was not something I saw with my eyes, do you understand? It was something I felt in the center of my being. A gentleness that knew me by name. Someone who knew every secret I kept in that bunker, every fear I whispered in the dark. And for the first time in eternity, I did not want to hide. I stopped. There, on that border between what I was and what I was about to be. The sound of the waters grew lower, giving way to an expectation that made my chest burn with joy. I was not alone. There, Wrapped in that glory that would make the sun look like an extinguished candle, I noticed a figure. A silhouette that radiated more love than all the love that has ever existed on earth since the beginning of time. My heart, the new heart I had just gained, leaped. I knew who it was, and he was waiting for me. Don't look away now, my children. What I am about to tell you is the heart of everything. What I saw in that light does not fit in books or on maps or in any frequency I caught in those desert years. You know that figure I saw? It was not a statue, it was not a painting. It was the very definition of home. I did not need to walk to him. The light itself carried me, as if I were a dry leaf being swept away by a river of honey. And when I got close, oh, when I got close, I saw that he did not have a face you could draw with ink, but a gaze that pierced through me as if I were made of glass. And for the first time in my existence, I was not afraid to be seen. You know that weight I felt in my chest, that anguish of spending a whole life watching targets, treating human beings as if they were just green electricity spikes on a screen. All of that simply dissolved. I felt as if warm, invisible water were washing my soul. Every mistake I made, every harsh word, every time I ignored the suffering of others in the name of duty, all of that was washed away. There was no judgment with pointing fingers. There was only a forgiveness that did not need sentences. We did not use our mouths to talk, you understand. It was not like on the radio where static gets in the way and words can be misinterpreted. There, communication was a deep knowing. His thoughts entered me like music. I felt what he felt, and what he felt for me, for that tired old spy full of secrets, was a love so vast, so unconditional, that I cried without having eyes and laughed without having a voice. I asked, or rather I felt the question inside me. Why me? Why seek me here after so much time buried in the dark? And the answer came like a hug that enveloped my whole being. He showed me a truth that left me breathless. Remember Channel 42? The sheep in the pasture? In that moment he made me see the world through his eyes. I saw that from up there are no borders. There are no attack codes or enemies on the other side of the line. I saw that every voice I intercepted in life, every whisper of fear I recorded, was the voice of a child of his. The commander I was watching, the man I called a target, he was my brother. And the sheep, oh, the sheep were all of us, lost on a battlefield we created ourselves. He showed me that the only translation that matters is the translation of love. That a second of compassion is worth more than a lifetime of successful military operations. I felt a peace so absolute that I only wanted to stay there, sitting at his feet, letting that light consume me until I was nothing more than a reflection of that glory. This is your place, my heart said. Finally, you have arrived. But then, the glow began to vibrate in a different way. The music of the waters grew deeper. I felt an invisible but firm hand rest on my shoulder. It was not to push me away, but to sustain me for what was to come. No words were spoken with sound, but the message echoed in every atom of my spirit. Not yet, my son. The time of shadows is not yet over for you. There is a truth that needs to be told, and only your voice can take it back. I wanted to scream, "No!" I did not want to go back to that cold bunker. I did not want to wear that heavy body again, that uniform full of sweat, and those headphones that smelled of old leather and war. I wanted the light. I wanted his lap. But his love was so great that I understood. I understood that going back was my final act of service. I felt the golden world begin to drift away. The honey light grew pale, and the sound of the waters was replaced by a rhythmic, metallic noise. Thud, 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 the sound of a heart beating again against its will. The sweet air vanished, and the smell of ozone and dust invaded my nostrils like a punch. Gravity grabbed me with fury. I felt the cold of the bunker's metal floor against my back. I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was the cruel, intermittent red glow of the emergency lights. I was back in the cave, but I was no longer Echo 7. I was a man who had seen the face of God, and now I had a mission that no general could understand. The return. Oh, my children. The return was like being ripped from a summer dream and suddenly thrown into an ice cell. I felt every gram of that old body starting to charge its price again, as if 1,000 mountains were being piled upon my chest. Gravity, that force we don't even notice while we are alive, it became an iron chain pulling me down, away from that honey light I had just met. I opened my eyes and the world was grey. It was not his golden light. It was the cold, sterile, soulless clarity of a hospital room. The smell of ozone from the bunker had given way to the smell of alcohol and death that haunts the hallways of men. I tried to breathe, but my lungs felt full of broken glass. Every beat of my heart was a punch, a painful reminder that the tent had not yet been fully taken down. I remember seeing the figures of doctors running, the metallic sound of the machines, beep, 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 that rhythmic sound that now seemed so small, so insignificant, before the music of the waters that still echoed in my soul. They thought they had saved me with their shocks and medicines. Little did they know that true life was what I had just left behind. It took me weeks to be able to speak, but inside me, Echo 7 had died on that metal floor. I could no longer look at intelligence monitors without seeing the faces of God's children. When I finally returned to work, or what was left of it, the first thing I did was look for Channel 42. The silence was there, but the fear was gone. The generals came to interrogate me. They wanted to know why I broke protocol, why I shouted on the radio, why I challenged the machine. They spoke of treason, of technical failure, of insubordination. I just looked at them, at those men burdened with medals and shadows, and felt a deep pity. They were fighting for a handful of earth, while I had seen the entire universe fit into a gaze of forgiveness. My career ended there, of course. They took my headphones, they took my access, they sent me home with a pension and a silence warning. But how do you silence someone who has heard the voice of eternity? Since that day, my children, death has ceased to be a monster hiding under the bed. It has become just a door that I know is open, waiting for the right moment for me to enter again, without uniforms, without codes, without the weight of this world. I learned that life is not what we accumulate in the bunker of our pride, but what we let his light illuminate. Now look at this old man speaking to you. The flames of this fireplace are already dying down, and mine are too. But I don't want you to leave here in fear. I want you to take one thing engraved deep within your being. Love is the only translation that does not fail. Why do you spend so much time hating those on the other side of the border? Why do you guard grudges as if they were treasures, if none of that passes through the crack of that light? If you could see just for a second how much you are loved, how much every mistake of yours has already been washed in that river of crystal, you would not waste another minute with what is fleeting. Forgive now. Hug now. Say, I love you, while your voice still has the weight of the earth's air. Because there, oh there, words will no longer be necessary, and the only thing you will take is what you gave for free. Do not fear the end. The end is just the Father turning off the room light so we can see the stars. Be at peace, my dears. Home is real, and he is waiting for each of you with dinner ready and the porch lit. The silence. Look, it is not empty. It is full of him. And that is all I needed to tell you before I leave. You can rest now. The war is over. I have already heard the radio, and the message is of peace.